Good evening, Chair. Calls to order public hearing for Bill 22-014, accessory structures. Mr. Schroeds.
Thank you, Council President. Essentially, what this bill does is that it removes the word habitable space from the current code and replaces it with the total square footage of the principal structure. And so it would be, the accessory structure could be 50% of the total footprint of the, the accessory structure can be 50% of the size of the principal structure, which would be a dwelling. So that's essentially what it does. It gives a little bit more flexibility to folks that want additional space for their belongings, like a garage. So that's pretty much what it does. It is also my understanding that even though it says habitable space, that they are giving credit for the basement already. So if we had a change in policy or a change in administration, you know, that could kind of be up in the air. And we don't know how that would go. So that's essentially what it does. Also currently, garages can be any size if they're attached to a principal dwelling or a home via a breezeway. So you can go as large as you want already. And it happens to be that the folks that reached out to me, they could put the same exact structure in the same location. However, they would have to spend about $25,000 to $30,000 to attach it with a breezeway to make that happen. The other thing with accessory buildings, if you get permits for them, you could have multiple accessory structures. This would minimize somebody replicating several buildings when they could maybe have it all under one roof by being able to have a slightly larger footprint based on 50% of the square foot of the principal dwelling. Also, I feel that in the urban residential districts where you have public water and sewer, that in most cases, with those smaller lot sizes, I don't think that you'll ever really have a scenario where somebody would be able to maximize a detached garage, for example. So I think that covers on that. I'm trying to hit on some things that, you know, may come up as being a possible concern. But the bottom line is you can do the same building, you would just have to attach it, or you could have a detached structure where, you know, you could have, there's already a requirement no matter what size principal dwelling you have, you can do a minimum of 1,000 square foot accessory structure. So you could have 1, 2, 3, but if you could just go a little larger, you wouldn't have to have multiple. You could have it all under one roof. And we all know, especially recently, a lot more folks are getting into RVs and boats and outdoor activities, and it seems like they need more space. You know, you drive down these commercial corridors, you see these yards where people store these recreational, you know, boats and such, you know, when they could maybe have it at their home if they had a little bit more space and keep them out of the weather. I did receive feedback from one constituent. I'm going to work with DILP to address that. Apparently there's a requirement having to do with 6.5 foot in this scenario. Seems like a certain neighbor was taking credit for a basement that they feel is less than the 6.5 height, and including that as space. But then the way the accessory structure was constructed, that it was less than that. But of course, on all building permits for accessories, it says may not be used for habitable space. However, they're using that as as their dimensions. So if you went above 6.5 foot, that would be part of the calculation. And in this case, it was shy of that. So it wasn't in the calculation of the accessory. However, they were using a number in the principal structure to get a higher number. So they were, that's something I'm going to try to work on with the administration, with both DILP and planning and zoning. If we could do that, I would appreciate that. But it's kind of probably a little bit of a unique situation in that case. But, basically it comes down to a little bit more flexibility to allow for a design that would be in scale with the principal structure of 50%, but also minimize the number of accessory structures and also the cost that it is costing our county residents by having to attach them via a breezeway or an addition or something like that. So that's what this does.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeds. Council, any questions of Mr. Schroeds? Ms. Dixon, we did receive correspondence that he referred to. We do want to put that in the record at the Mr. Lynch's request, okay?
I do have that.
Thought of one other thing. The other thing is I wanted to point out is if you're zoned agricultural and you're assessed agricultural, that you can build a building any size on your property. And sometimes there are cases where that could be converted into something later on. So if we can have people go through the process of actually getting permits, then we'll hopefully minimize the buildings that aren't getting permits. They're legally put in as ag. You do need permits, of course, for your electrical and your plumbing, but sometimes these buildings could be there and a new owner comes in and they retrofit. So I think this may minimize that as well. I mean, it would be, those would be true for agricultural purposes, and this would be more for personal and storage and such. So,
Okay. Mr. Giangiordano?
So if that's the case, it's all in the ag zone, then why the 5 acres? Because then somebody who's got 4 acres could still build whatever they want with underneath that acreage, correct? Because you're limiting this to greater than 5 acres, but if somebody has 4 acres, as you just said, in agricultural, they can put any kind of building they want, and whether it's an accessory dwelling or not, over
well, if
the
you're
half of the
zoned,
square footage.
if you're zoned and assessed ag, regardless of the number of acres, I mean, it could be, usually it's not as low as 5 acres. I would say most ag zoned, ag assessed properties are over 10 acres. And, some are 25, 50, 100, however many acres, but it's really separate. It's kind of a separate thing.
So why don't you take the 5 acres out and just put agricultural? Because then anything under 5 acres, if you do have a farm that's 3.7 in agriculture, and I'm sure there are.
There's two things here. If you are over 5 acres, you're allowed to go up to 2,500 square feet, or the same 50% rule that we have. It doesn't really change anything.
What if you're under 5 acres? That's my point. What if you're under 5 acres? How does this affect under 5 acres?
All this really does is how you calculate to get to your 50%.
I understand that.
Regardless of whether you're ag or in any zoning district, and
But the way
regardless
this
of any acreage.
But the way this reads, it says for properties greater than 5. So if you're not excluding, they're including. So you're just saying, the way that reads, and I'm looking at it, it says great for properties greater than 5 acres in the AG district. So if they're under 5 acres, they can do something different.
The only difference is between under 5 and over 5 is that you can go up to 2,500 square feet. And if you're less than 5 acres, you can automatically go to 1,000 square feet. So if you had a ranch home kind of thing, and let's say your house was 1,200 square foot, you could go up to 1,000 square foot on your garage.
Or can they build the breezeway like you said and build something over
You can
that?
always do that. You could actually have a garage that's many times bigger than your house if it's attached.
So you can have a garage attached, and then you can have another garage attached to that as well, if you want it, because I know a couple that are done that way, right?
I guess you can, because then it's part of your house. Essentially, that is the principal dwelling at that point, but
Well, it's not part of your house, it's an attached structure to your house.
right, but the way it's looked at and the way that it's kind of classified as your principal structure.
As I look at it,
Structure.
as to ensure it, there's a primary residence with an attached two-car garage or an attached four-car garage, whether it's two cars or one four-car. It's still an attached structure. It's not part of the house. And then how big is that attached structure? And is there living space above that attached structure?
And in that case, you could have living space above a garage because it's essentially, when it's attached in part of that principal structure, which would be a dwelling, you could have living space, and you know, there are examples of where, you could have your garage bigger than your house in that case. And I know we both are aware of probably some of the same properties where, where that's done, but the way planning and zoning looks at it is that that would all be your principal structure in that case. This would minimize those kind of odd-looking principal structures or single-family homes with attached garages, because they might have preferred to separate it. However, the way the law is currently written, the only way for them to go about it is to attach it, because then they can go as big as they want.
Anyone else? Ms. Dixon, do we have anyone signed up?
There is no one signed up, Mr. President.
All right, with no one else signed up, this will conclude this public hearing on Bill 22-014, and we will consider it at a later date. Bill 22-015, revised prior year bond bills. Mr. Sandless, Mr. Sulfur. Good evening.
Good evening. And Council President, we'd probably ask if we could take up all three of these bills in the same comments.
Council, any objections? Very well.
Good evening, Council President, members of the council. Robbie Sandless, Harford County Treasurer, here with John Soffert, our bond counsel, here with something we bring each and every year, which is our bond authorization bill that follows right after our adoption of the budget. And for the most part, really what this entails is that any of those projects that had bond funding on them, either new bonds or reallocated bonds in the budget, we then ask for bond authorization for those projects on an individual project basis before actual spending on any of those projects would commence. So I will let our bond counsel kind of just talk a little bit about the legislation, then I'll come back and touch on some of the projects as well as how the process will play out after this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. John Stauffer, Miles and Stockbridge Bond Counsel. Bill 2216 authorizes the county to issue its general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $120,360,000, the proceeds of which will be used to fund the county's capital program. The bill describes the various capital projects, which Mr. Sandless will detail, and the respective amounts to be funded with the proceeds of the bonds. In addition to the maximum principal amount of the bonds, the bill further provides a maximum maturity of 20 years and sets forth the amortization schedule, subject to change by the county council. The bill provides that prior to the issuance of the bonds, the county council shall determine by administrative resolution the essential terms and details of the bonds, including the interest rate on the bonds. The county's full faith and credit and taxing powers are pledged to the repayment of the bonds pursuant to the bill. The bill further provides for the public sale of the bonds and the procedures for such sale, including the form of notice of sale. Lastly, the bill provides that instead of a public sale of bonds for financing certain of the capital projects for water pollution and stormwater projects, the indebtedness may be incurred pursuant to loans from the Maryland Water Quality Financing Administration in an amount not to exceed $8,450,000. And that amount is included within the foregoing $360,000 maximum principal amount for all indebtedness. These stormwater projects and the respective amounts of each are described in the bill, and the county's full faith and credit and taxing power are also pledged to secure such loans.
Do you also touch on the?
You want me to talk about the water?
Yeah, and then I'll just talk to them all.
Okay.
Yes.
The Bill 2217 is very similar to 2216. It authorizes the issuance of general obligation bonds not to exceed $10,965,000, which are going to be used to fund the county's water and sewer projects. Describes those projects, same details with respect to these bonds as are detailed with respect to the capital improvement program bonds. Again, the full faith and credit of the county is pledged to these bonds in the event that funds from the operation of the water and sewer projects designated for the payment of debt service on these bonds are insufficient. And again, the bill allows for the indebtedness to be incurred by loans from the Maryland Water Quality Financing Administration.
Okay. So Bill 22-016, which is our taxpayer-supported debt. This is debt that will be paid for with future taxing proceeds in the amount of $120,360,000. About half of those expenditures, or half of those projects, are for education related between the school system, the community college, and the library. Some of the more significant projects there are the Homestead Wakefield, the new Homestead Wakefield building, as well as also the Community College Chesapeake Welcome Center. As far as the remaining projects, some other projects of note, the Harford County Sheriff's Office Central Precinct and Training Center is included in that. There's about $8.5 million in stormwater projects. Those are those projects that meet our stormwater remediation goals and are financed with recordation. About $6 million in public safety, most notably the Riverside Fire and EMS station. And then we also have about $11.6 million in various road projects, roads, bridges, the most notable one there being Woodley Road. Then on the 22-017, just shy of $11 million there in water and sewer projects. Those projects are completely financed by various fees that are charged to water and sewer users. So if you are part of the water and sewer system, you support that debt. If you are not part of the water and sewer system, if you're on a well, none of your taxes or fees go to support that debt. So once again, our water and sewer system is a completely separate enterprise system paid for by the users. And then Bill 22-015, sometimes we have projects that have some remaining funds on them. We still have bond authorization, but we need to move it to new projects. So in that case, we have a little bit of cleanup there. We actually had some, you can see that kind of goes back to fiscal year 13. For the most part, that was some Board of Education projects that the Board of Ed came to you last week or the week before and asked you to approve those transfers, as well as we had one other water and sewer project in there. Again, all of these projects were all part of the budget that was recently adopted, so there's no change there. And then again, what we have forward here won't necessarily be what we sell this year. When the county goes to the bond market early next year under the new administration, we will then look at what our needs are as far as how projects are moving and the like. Because for the most part, we reimburse ourselves That enables us to kind of avoid arbitrage issues, enables us to take on any debt service before we have to. So the amount that we actually will sell later on this year will not necessarily correspond to these amounts, but eventually all of those bonds, of course, it'll take several years, will be sold. And again, that process will be subject to council approval, as it always is. We'll bring the terms of sale, and then we'll actually bring the actual sale to you from any of the competing bids that put in bids for to purchase the county's bonds.
Thank you, Robbie. Council, any questions? Mr. Giangiordano?
Thanks, Robbie. So I know that when we issued our last bonds, the interest rate was not as good as the year before, but I think it was still pretty good, probably in the 2% range, isn't that what it?
Yeah, still under 3. I mean, we had 2 years or so before that, we had rates that were right around 1%, but
So-
yeah.
What are you hearing? What are we anticipating? Is there any way to judge what that could be? Is that because of the inflation? Will that drive these rates up significantly?
I mean, there is
He's
some.
smiling, so I'm not sure what.
There is some correlation, but it's not 100%. It's just like with, there's still a lot of demand out there for municipal bonds. And if you look right now with how some of, hopefully you have not looked at your own personal 401k today, it's not looking good. But sometimes in those environments, even if you have rising interest rates, if the investment community sees an opportunity to get a 3% rate of return, that beats a negative return. So inflation is a part of it, what Treasury bills are going for, but we're in some weird times here. The dollar is still relatively strong. Interest rates are rising, but they're still not at the level of what the inflationary rate is. We don't have a 10% inflation rate. And then there's always the difference between, we're selling 20-year bonds, and they have the benefit, for the most part, of being tax exempt, so that affords us a premium, so that the investment community is able to look at that rate of return and they discount it to say, okay, because I'm getting that rate of return, but I don't have to pay taxes on it. So it's kind of that's why we're able to get these lower rates of return, because it's like a bonus in essence for them. We will see. I don't think we're going to go back to those really strong rates that we had, but again, county being a solid AAA county, we have a lot going for us, and we'll have to ride that out, and hopefully it will. Again, expect it to increase somewhat, but I don't think we'll necessarily be seeing anything particularly dire.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano. Anyone else? Mr. Wagner?
I've got a question on page 6, under the Harford County Sheriff's Office Central Precinct and Training Facility. The number that's reflected there, is that, or should be, or we expect that to be the total build-out for the addition and the renovations and everything, or is there something else?
Well, that's only the bonds affiliated with this year. So I don't have the whole capital book in front of me.
Okay.
But if you look, there may have been, I think there definitely are some out-year numbers in there. I don't think there was any prior funding there. But of course, we already own a
Right.
good chunk of the property, so that's there. But this just reflects the new bonds that were put on, and bonds only, for fiscal year '23 budget.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Anyone else? All right, seeing no one else, thank you for coming forward. This will conclude excuse me, we have anyone signed up?
There is no one signed up, Mr. President.
Thank you. This will conclude this public hearing. I saw you getting ready to jump on me. And we'll take it up at a later date. Thanks. So council, next is Bill 22-018, Police Accountability Board and Charging Committee. Ms. Lambert? Mary Kate?
Smiling at this set up on the screen, or we're gonna trust Melissa to guide it.
I don't know if I like that.
We're all scared.
Bill 2218, the Police Accountability Board and the Charging Committee. As you know, House Bill 670, the Police Accountability Act of 2021 at the legislative session in Annapolis requires all counties to establish these boards by July 1st of 2022. At this point, we have a slide presentation to review with you, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Herbig, who will go through it with you, and then we can answer any questions that you may have upon the conclusion.
Whenever you're ready.
As Mrs. Lambert said, House Bill 670, Chapter 59 of the 2021 General Assembly mandated that we create these two boards, and the reason being is it also repealed the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights come July 1. So in an attempt to do that, and because we were waiting, we brought it over a little later because the county executive wanted to wait and see what was coming out on the Police Standards Commission for COMAR. And so that's where we are, and that's what we tried to do. So 90% of the bill you have in front of you is either requirements under the state law or under what the proposed COMAR regulations are. So the first board would be the Police Accountability Board, and that's probably the one where the county has the most play in what they can do. You can establish the membership, budget and staff, appoint the chair who has relevant experience in law enforcement, and establish procedures for record keeping. And all of that is spelled out in the state law that we have to do these things. So under the charge that the county executive gave us, he established a 5-member Police Accountability Board. The qualifications for eligibility, you need to be a county resident, 21 years of age or older, a legal resident or U.S. citizen. You're ineligible as a member if you're an active police officer, and that is a requirement of the state law. And we added to that an employee of the sheriff's office or an employee of a local municipal police agency, because the local municipal police agencies will fall under these boards as well. So the thinking there was they probably tie too closely to the officers. The final one is that if you've been convicted or received probation before judgment for a felony or misdemeanor where the sentence could be imprisonment of a year or more, you would not be eligible. And part of the reason we have these requirements is that COMAR has spelled out that those are the requirements for the charging committee, and a member of the Police Accountability Board must sit on the charging committee by state law. So if those requirements are consistent, we won't have a problem with the chair or another member serving on the charging committee. The accountability board's responsibilities and duties are all spelled out in the state law. They are required to hold quarterly meetings with the heads of the law enforcement agencies in the county to discuss matters of improving policing. They also appoint 2 members to the charging committee. They are the body that will receive complaints from the public regarding police misconduct. They also will review quarterly the outcomes of the disciplinary matters that are considered by the charging committee, and their final duty will be by December 31st to submit a report to the county governing body that would recommend any policy changes that would help police accountability in the county. The state law also specifies what is considered what would be classified as a complaint for police misconduct. And to be a complaint of misconduct, it has to be filed either with the accountability board, or it still can be filed directly with the law enforcement agency. The complaint has to name the officer who's accused of misconduct. It has to give a description of the facts on which the complaint is based, and it has to contain the name and contact information of the complainant or the person filing on behalf of the complainant. And the complaint of misconduct has to be forwarded by the Police Accountability Board to the appropriate law enforcement agency, and that would be the one from which the officer belongs, within 3 days of the receipt by the board. Next, and just so you know, we would consider the Police Accountability Board much like we would our other boards. They're looking at policies and things like this. The Administrative and Charging Committee is a different type of board than what we normally have, because they are really going to be the disciplinary board. And the requirements for that are really spelled out both in the state law and in the COMAR regulations. It's composed of 5 persons under the state law. It is the chair of the Accountability Board or a member selected by the chair from the Accountability Board. There are 2 appointments by the Police Accountability Board to the Charging Committee, and those are civilian members, and the county executive has 2 appointments to the Charging Committee. All members have to have a criminal history background check performed, and they cannot have received either a sentence or PBJ for a misdemeanor or felony for where the sentence could be a year or more. The members are also required under state law to complete the training of the Maryland Police Training Commission. The duties of the Charging Committee are spelled out in the state law. They are required to review the findings by the law enforcement agency who does the investigation and it's the law enforcement agency to which the officer belongs. They are also required to review any body cam footage that may be relevant to the matter. They then must determine whether to administratively charge the officer or not. If the officer is charged, they then make a recommendation of discipline in accordance with the disciplinary matrix which was developed or is developed by the Maryland State Police Training Commission. And that's a sliding scale, just, for discipline. It's a range. It's not one event and it's one discipline. It's a range that they can. And then they are required, if they decide to charge or not, they have to issue a written decision that describes and details their findings, determinations, and recommendations. And that written opinion must be forwarded to the chief of the law enforcement agency, the police officer, and the complainant. And our final slide is sort of a flow chart of how we envision this would roll out. And the first, you can see the Police Accountability Board, they would receive the complaint. That complaint would be forwarded to the law enforcement agency to which the officer belongs within the 3 days. The law enforcement agency will then investigate that complaint, and upon completion of their investigation, they must forward that to the Charging Committee. The Charging Committee will review that file and any body cam footage, and then make their determination. If they determine not to charge, then they would issue the opinion and issue that to, again, the complainant, the chief of the law enforcement agency, and the officer. If they decide they are going to charge, then they must make a recommendation for discipline in accordance with the matrix. That is forwarded to the chief officer of the law enforcement agency to which the officer belongs, or the chief can make a decision to give him discipline that's greater than the committee has recommended, and then that is given to the officer. If the officer accepts it, the matter is closed. If not, the officer can appeal to a trial board.
Can I ask on that point?
Yes.
At that instance, does the chief officer that you're talking of, you said could make the punishment stiffer than what was recommended? He could also make it less? Cannot make it less?
Well, the state law does not provide.
The state law does not provide for that.
Can you
However,
just,
So he has to abide by what the recommendation is or a greater?
That's what the state law provides for, that the committee makes a recommendation for, under the matrix,
Right.
but the chief, state law says the chief may impose a different penalty, but it has to be stricter than what they've imposed.
Okay. Thank you.
Law says.
Are you finished then with your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jandrodana?
thanks, Council President. So going back to what Wagner says, can the chief choose not to do anything? Not less of a sentence, but can he choose? Is there anything in the law that says he has to, or can he decide he's not going to do anything?
He has to do something. I mean, his options are you enforce what the committee has given, or you make a stronger recommendation for discipline. That's what the state law says.
Okay, I'm just curious if it left a loophole that maybe he, if he didn't have to submit anything, or if he had to comply.
Oh, again, remember, this is taking away your law enforcement officer's Bill of Rights. This is now the discipline procedure they have to go through.
Where before we had a unified program across?
Correct, with the
And
law
now it's by
enforcement.
jurisdiction?
Right, it's by jurisdiction.
Okay.
Now, the uniformity is the matrix. Everybody's got to adopt the
Yes.
state matrix. But how that's meted out will be different now.
Before we go any further, I want to thank the both of you for the time that you spent bringing us up to speed with where we're at today and helping us better understand the process and where it goes from here. We know that we're still waiting on a major part, which is the appointment list, to come to us to confirm.
And just one thing I wanted to add is that we at this point still don't have a finalized version of what COMAR is recommending with regard to this legislation. And really, the state law provides the ability for COMAR to weigh in on how some of these procedures should be implemented. So there are still some things which even today, Mary Kate and I are in flux as to what is going to be the final version, so.
But that doesn't hold us up from getting the list of appointments.
No, it
Okay.
doesn't have anything to do with that, but I just wanted to dovetail on what we had been discussing with regard to all of these requirements. There are still COMAR regulations that we haven't seen a final
Final
version of.
version of.
Right. So I know that we're on a timeline, and that's why I'm bringing that up. And I've had multiple conversations with everyone involved, from the sheriff, county executive, the law department, right straight on down, my colleagues. And I know they have a lot of questions. And if I may, I'd like to start with Councilman Johnson. I know he has several.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, ladies. Looking over this bill, and now that we're where we are, how do we determine what the life experiences of the members would be? Because I see in here in the bill that that's one of the criteria as far as law enforcement, community policing, criminology. So those are some of the things that people's life experiences would determine that they should be on this board. So who determines what the life experiences are?
Well, we put out an ad that was on our website inviting people to apply for both the Police Accountability Board and for the Charging Committee. And we highlighted these areas, but we also said any other relevant experience as well. And then we asked them to explain why their past experience would make them a good fit for it, and any memberships that they have that they think would be helpful for the county executive to make his determination as to who should be selected for the board. So while we did put out these criteria, we also did ask some questions, open-ended ones, so people could explain why they thought they would be a good fit for either of the boards or both boards.
So the valuable, the value to the board, could someone that has not corrections, let's say a carpenter or someone like that, could that person be a valued member to the board?
It certainly does not exclude that. I think that it would be important to see what somebody would put into how they think their background would make them a good fit. So we certainly didn't exclude anyone based on what their job description was, but really what perspective they thought they could bring to the job and the function of the board.
And then who makes that final decision on if they're the right fit for that? The county executive or, okay. The other question, another question I have is for the background. So I see in the background, it says background / social media. So if someone doesn't agree with what's in your posts on social media, that's a disqualifying factor?
That's for the charging committee?
Yes.
I don't know if it's a disqualifying, but that came out of COMAR.
Okay.
That's part of the investigation and background. That is from COMAR directly.
Yeah,
which is
I
why
know
it's-
that what you sent over to me was color-coded, so everything, Comar State, Comar and State. But this was I guess this was something that Harford County, or I guess Harford County, you all had put in here. So that's why I'm asking.
Actually, I think the part about the social
Media,
media
that's
is
Comar.
part of Comar,
Yes.
and
Okay.
that's only for the
Charging committee.
not for the police
Not for
accountability
the-
board. And we didn't make it part of the requirements for the
Police Accountability Board.
Just that there
Back-
would be a general
background
background
check.
check, just to check for the,
Sure.
how somebody can't have a conviction of something
Sure.
for a year or more.
Okay. And so, also in the bill, it talks about conflict of interest. And so, the law department is the custodian of the records, right? So, would that be a conflict of interest since the law department defends, or do you all defend the
We-
police departments?
We would be the custodian of records for the Police Accountability Board for the complaints. That's what we have set up, much like we are for the Board of Ethics. We just hold the records. In terms of the conflict of interest, that again was Comar for a member of the charging committee to come forward if they have a conflict of interest and to let, their chair know, in this case with this officer, I may have a conflict of interest and cannot
I
hear.
may know them, I may know the complainant, something
So
like
that-
that they would be required
Right.
to bring that forward, and so the board could consider whether they should continue to hear the case.
That wouldn't be a record we would have.
So it would, so in your thoughts, it would not be a conflict of interest if you defend whatever jurisdiction and then you're
I
holding the
think-
rest.
right, I
Are we
think
talking
they're
about two
different questions, right, exactly. I think that with regard to a conflict of interest, where that keys into the provisions of the bill, is that if someone on the charging committee has a conflict of interest with any of the parties that may be involved in the case, like if they knew the officer, if they knew the complaining witness, if they, may have been, they saw what happened, and they might not think that they should be sitting in judgment of that. But there is the second issue of who gives advice to the charging committee with regard to if they have legal questions that they want to ask. And that is something that has come up not only here, but in other counties. And it has been pretty much determined that because our law department does defend the sheriff's office with regard to any claims, that we would not be giving legal advice to the charging committee. What we will be doing is finding a law firm that will give them legal advice to separate us. And one of the other counties, Montgomery County, said that they were going to try to do it in-house because they had so many attorneys. Clearly not what we have here in Harford County. So, but even with like 50 attorneys, they still said no, that there's too much of a chance for a conflict there. And they also had to get outside counsel to represent their boards to give them legal advice.
So I also saw that you only hold the records for 5 years. Why 5 years? Why not indefinitely?
I mean, I don't know that we have an actual answer for that. That was just the number we came up with. We only hold financial disclosure records for 4 years. So it was like, weighing, I think financial records are usually 7 years, so we just,
So what if
There's nothing that requires us to hold it for any amount of time.
Time.
We just have to set an amount.
and if there was action ongoing, those records would be held. If there was court action,
Right.
obviously, if it was
Right.
beyond 5 years, we would be holding on to those.
Right.
Right.
Which
It would
will
be-
do
we-
in
we-
situations
right.
where there may be appeals pending or
Right.
other type of actions. We would just
Automatically
automatically
hold
do
on to that.
But if there was no action in the case and it was truly after 5 years adjudicated and completed, at that point, we were going to then not keep those records.
And I also noticed that, and I know I'm talking to two brilliant legal minds here. We know the words matter, right? So I see a lot of shall in here, but I don't see must. And I know people may look at that as semantics and all that stuff and everything like that. But shall expresses a strong assertion, and must means to be obligated to do so. So there is something in here from, I guess, the state that says that a member with a potential conflict of interest must announce, and that's on page 12, right? But there was, if you
Yeah,
see,
you're right, you're right,
right,
right, and that is
So-
from
Comar.
right.
That we took directly from them.
So, and I don't want to split hairs here, but why does Comar use that? And then sort of like in other sections of the bill, we use shall?
I'm not sure I can answer that. Again, it was the Police Training Commission that came up with, or is working on the Comar regs.
And it was their decision to use that word.
And there needs to be, in here, it says that it needs to be three folks on, to make a quorum. And I see that a person could miss 3 meetings, and then they would have to be dismissed, right? I think just based off of how, how dire or how significant this, this group is, or this committee is there a certain way that we could look at cutting that down? Because I don't think that 3 members constituting a quorum could make decisions on whatever's going on. I mean, because,
Probably Comar.
I mean, that again, I think is Comar for the charging committee?
yeah, it's meetings, budgets, and records. The only reason why I ask these questions is because you all sent it over and you highlighted what was Comar, what was state, and what was Comar and state, and then everything else, I was assuming was
I see.
what you
I see, you're
filled in.
talking about the Police Accountability Board. I got you. Mhm.
Yes. So,
The only thing I would say about the Police Accountability Board is that they are the ones who find trends, who look at trends and then make a report every year about what could be done. You know, if in a given year there were 5 cases involving the use of a stun gun, they might say, you know, maybe a good idea for the police agencies is to have more training on stun guns. So that, so the Police Accountability Board is certainly important, but they do something involving perspective trends and doesn't do the actual discipline of the police officers. That is the accountability board.
so am I getting this confused? Because I'm thinking that we're talking about the Police Accountability Board, but, good.
You're right, it is, but remember, that's a 5-member board, so 3 members would be a quorum of a 5-member board.
Right,
Right.
but what I'm asking is that based off of, because they're only meeting quarterly, and based off of what's in here right now, a person can miss nearly the entire year, and you can, and you may only have 3 members making a quorum, and you're making decisions based off of police.
Policy decisions,
Right.
yes, sir.
So is there a way that we can look at adjusting that? Because I think that if we have members missing 3, almost a year of hearings or meetings or whatever, then I think that it's doing a disservice to the board.
You okay? Sure.
That's all I have, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Jan Giordano?
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening.
So I heard you say something about the financial responsibility, that you keep that for 5 years. So are you also looking into the financials of the people on the accountability board to see if somebody's declared bankruptcy or not? Is
No,
that-
he asked why 5 years, and I was saying, that was, the state law tasked us with coming up with keeping records. How long are you going to do it? There's no requirement.
Right. No, I understand that. I'm just going back to the financial disclosure. And on the financial disclosure, are you looking for, or if any of these people are bankruptcy or anything like that?
And either the state law or the COMAR has suggested doing that type of an analysis.
Okay. So that, just they have to provide a financial statement.
Well,
No.
They don't have to,
No.
what was
No,
the
we're-
financial disclosure then?
No, I said financial records, they're generally kept for 7 years.
Okay.
We keep our Board of Ethics records for 4 years, so we
just
just
in terms of what our document
how we
retention
came up with
policies are.
5, sort of.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about financial, that each one of these people also had to fill out a financial
No.
disclosure if they were on the board.
No, and I haven't seen any counties that have required that.
Okay. Well, thank you. My misunderstanding, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano. Anyone else? Mr. Wagner?
Just to clarify, because I was asked this question, and I think I shared it with you when we all met, people were wondering what police agencies in the county would be affected by this, specifically municipalities. And the truth of the matter is, they're all affected by this, and they all fall under the purview of this
these
once it's
committees,
constituted,
correct.
right?
Correct.
So that, I just wanted you to
Be the
get that out
municipalities and
tonight.
the sheriff's office,
So
all
that
of
everybody
them
knows
fall
it's
under
not
these.
just the sheriff's office,
Correct.
it's everyone in Hartford County and any county, I guess, in terms of the municipality,
Correct.
the local police and everything.
Correct.
Except for the state police.
They have their own.
Right.
Right. That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Buell?
One quick question, because I was asked this for clarification. When it comes to being disqualified for, shall we say, criminal activity, if an individual has ever, shall we say, I think it read, if you had a felony or, say if you had a felony and then you got no pardon, could you serve on the board? Say 20, that, I
I definitely think that is something, if they could provide documentation to show that, we should take that into consideration. I know when people get their records expunged, if you pull their record, it's not on there. So you would qualify because you got it expunged and it no longer exists on your record.
So if you have convicted, you have a felony, and you got it expunged or got a pardon, then I'll leave it right now, because I couldn't find it in the state bill. It was a little kind of,
So, right, I guess what I would feel comfortable saying is that if someone has gotten something expunged off of their record, that won't then show up on their record. So
Okay.
when we do a criminal background check of that person, it won't show up on there. Now, with regard to a pardon situation, I haven't had that much experience with that, but I certainly would recommend that if we could be provided the documentation to show of the pardon, then we would take that into consideration with regard to their eligibility. I would look at anything anyone had to show us.
okay, just one.
Thank you, Mr. Buell.
Oh, one other thing. Can we get a copy of your presentation, digital? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
in a
I can send you
PDF.
digital. Yeah.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buell. Ms. Lambert, how many applicants?
I think over 40. Over 40.
Over 40. And background checks are being done now? Is that what I understood?
That is my understanding,
And we have no idea when we're going to get the list of applicants.
I'm encouraging that we can get them as soon as possible.
Okay,
No idea.
okay. Council, anyone else? Ms. Dixon, do we have one signed up?
We do, Mr. President. We have one this evening, Cassandra Beverly.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Council President Vicente and members of the County Council. Thank you all for allowing me to speak this evening. I just wanted to express my profound disappointment in how long it has taken for this bill to come before you. As you know, the Maryland Police Accountability Act was passed last year, and many other jurisdictions had already begun working on this process. As a matter of fact, this bill is so late, according to Cindy Mumby, she said is being put in as emergency legislation because it is so late. You know, I'm vice chair of the Caucus of African American Leaders. I also participated in a group called the Coalition for Equal Justice that was formulated from members of the caucus, the NAACP, Together We Will, and also one other group, which of course right now is slipping my mind. But in any event, we did reach out and ask early on in the year about what was going on with this legislation, and we offered to be of assistance. Like Anne Arundel County, they started their process in January. They had a stakeholders engagement and outreach in January. In February, they introduced a bill. In March, they had public hearings. So they had an orderly, transparent process rather than trying to cram this in so that it could be in place by July 1. I'm not certain exactly how the number 5 came up. I know that Howard County and Charles have 9 members. Some counties have others do have 5, but I have no idea how they came up with that number. I'm concerned about how you get diversity when the PAB should reflect the composition of the county. With 5 members, I think that you're going to have a difficult time doing that. So, as I said, and I contrast this with, I was looking at an article where the health department was seeking public input on a walking trail. Now, this is an issue that has been of profound interest to many members in our community. But I'll bet you many members still are unaware that this legislation has even been introduced. This bill was introduced May the 10th. It was in the Aegis on May the 14th. You had to apply for the PAB by June the 3rd and for the charging committee by June the 10th. You're doing this county a disservice by handling this matter of such extreme importance in such a rush fashion. I question whether or not a complainant, if you don't know the officer's name, is that a way that they can then avoid having to deal with any charges if they just simply withhold their name? Will the training that's required of the members be completed by July the 1st? I did have one of my other questions answered in terms of how many people have applied, but it's quite clear that this is a rushed process. You're asking how many names, when are you going to get the names? This is not how something of this importance should have been handled, and there was no reason for it. As I said, there were those of us in the community who reached out, who asked to be involved, who wanted to be engaged in this process, and we were not given an opportunity to do that. And so I just want to go on record and express my extreme frustration and disappointment in how this was handled. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
There is no one else signed up, Mr. President.
Thank you. With no one else signed up, we'll conclude this public hearing. And also, we will take a recess till 7:30. Good evening. Chair calls to order legislative session day 22-019. I would ask you to please join us in standing for the pledge led by Mr. Zach Drake from Troop 265 and following with the opening prayer by Councilman Wagner. Whenever you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening thankful for this day and the opportunity you have given each of us to serve the citizens of Harford County. We pray for healing to those in our community that are suffering. We pray your spirit be made known to the family of our friend Al Seymour. For the family and friends of Wycomico County Sheriff Deputy Glenn Hilliard, give them comfort and spiritual healing for what we as reasonable people cannot understand. Bless each of our law enforcement personnel, keep them safe as they strive to make a difference each day in such a changing environment. Lord, we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Council may have general consent to move to item 5 on the agenda and return back to agenda item 4 thereafter.
So moved.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, consideration petitions, applications, appointments, and nominations. Hartford Living Treasurer Alan M. Mack Lloyd and Sandra E. Lloyd. May I have a motion? Mr. Schroeds.
Council President, I make a motion to approve Alan McLeod and Sandra E. Lloyd, recommended from the Hartford Cultural Arts Board as a Hartford Living Treasurer.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. It's moved and seconded to approve Hartford Living Treasurer. Any comments? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
There being 7 votes in the affirmative and 0 in the negative, the appointments of Alan Mack Lloyd and Sandra E. Lloyd as a Hartford Living Treasurer is hereby approved. Agenda item number 4, presentation of proclamations. Mr. Schroeds, if you'll step down. Mack, Sandra, if you come forward, please, and your family. Gentlemen.
You ready?
Let me get up here a little
All right.
closer. Stand off to the side a little bit, Chad. Let them come in a little bit. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Wagner.
Whereas Alan Mack Lloyd and Sandra E. Lloyd received the Hartford County Cultural Arts Board recommendation of the Hartford County Council for recognition as Hartford Living Treasures. And whereas Mack and Sandy Lloyd are lifelong residents of Hartford County, Mack was born and raised in Cardiff. His father, Bud Lloyd, was one of the premier players in the Susquehanna Baseball League in the 1930s through 1950s. Mack's finest sporting achievement was leading the county in scoring and winning the Maryland State Basketball Championship with North Hartford High School during his senior season in 1962. Mack is best known locally as the longtime sports editor of the Aegis and later as the publisher of the Sporting Times. And whereas Sandy Graff Lloyd had a rural upbringing as the oldest of 5 children, after graduating from North Hartford and Towson State, she began a 42-year career as an educator in Hartford County Public Schools. For most of her career, she taught 2nd grade at Edgewood Elementary, then became a Title I teacher specialist in the Edgewood, Magnolia, and Aberdeen areas. And whereas Mack and Sandy are longtime active members of Churchville Presbyterian Church, Mack is a past trustee, deacon, and elder, and Sandy is currently an elder. Sandy also served for many years as the president of the daycare board, volunteering many hours working on behalf of the daycare and Sunday school programs. Mack is currently a member of the Churchville Ruritan Club, and both are longtime supporters of the Hartford Land Trust. Now therefore, we, the County Council of Hartford County, Maryland, on this 14th day of June 2022, do hereby proclaim Alan M. Lloyd and Sandra E. Lloyd Hartford Living Treasures, and be it further known that their lifetime experiences and contributions to the Hartford County community will provide a permanent record which will recall the past, inform the present, and guide the future of Hartford County, and that their memories and history will be recorded by the Hartford County Public Library oral historian and will become part of the oral history collection of the library.
For our group picture, could everyone in the front scoot this way just a little bit, please? Just even it out a little bit.
That told me to go that way.
Okay, yes, that's good, except Mr. Giangiordano, I can't see you.
Yeah, I know. Mack Lloyd's a lot taller than me, and I'm up here, so.
That's good, that looks good, all right. Perfect. Okay.
I'm short, but I might be mighty.
Might
Just
be, I like that.
Just a few words I wanted to give. You know, I've known you both for a very long time, and Mac, I remember when, back in high school, one of the first things I would do is when the Aegis came out, I would go right to the sports page and see your articles and see what the different teams were doing and what they were, what you were saying, and you always had great commentary, and you know, we're kind of evolving into an age out of the newspaper era into something more electronic, and who knows where that's going, but I always, you know, cherish that, and I know that you were part of the state championship team when North Hartford won the states back in 1962, which celebrated its 60th anniversary this year, and unfortunately, due to COVID, we weren't able to have the big celebration we had hoped to have at the school during one of their games. And then also, I read your story for the 250th anniversary of Harford County, and you know, just, it almost reads like a movie. I could almost visualize everything that was going on, and I knew some of the individuals that you commentaried on, and I just think that that's going to be a really nice part of that overall collection. And I know, Sandy, you've been in the school system and retired after, I think, 42 years. 42, yeah. And, you know, thanks for what you do in your community and your church. I know you're very involved there, and I see you oftentimes with your grandkids on the athletic fields because I know you are play on the same team as my nephew Charlie. So it's great to still see you out there, and I know if you could, you probably, or in your mind, you might be at home even writing stories about those games. I don't know, but
I'm taking them in, I'll tell you that.
anyway, both of you are true Hartford living treasures, and I know we all look forward to seeing your oral history that's going to be recorded into the future, and it will always be around for not only your grandkids to go back and to look at, but even their children one day. So, very good.
It's like working for a history book.
Yes. If you have anything to say, or
All right, well, I guess I'm the teacher, so I'm the talker.
Right. He's a writer.
Yeah, he's a writer. He's quiet. I would just like to thank the county council for this program and for including us in the program. That really validates Harford County's, the importance Harford County places on its senior citizens and their contributions. Giving back is something we've tried to instill in our children. All of us are born with gifts and talents, and I think it's our responsibility to give back to our county and our neighborhoods, and we have instilled that in our children, and we see them at work right now doing wonderful things. So thank you.
Yep, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Thanks.
Mac. Behave yourself now.
All right, I'm misreading your stories all the time.
Agenda item number 6, special presentations. We have none. 7, approval of minutes. Order update, June 7th, 2022. Public hearing, June 7th, 2022. Legislative day, 22-018, June 7th, 2022. Are there any corrections to the minutes? There being no corrections, the minutes stand approved. Agenda item number 8, introduction and consideration of resolutions. Mr. Wagner.
Move for the approval of resolution number 018-22, performance and operational audits FY 2023.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bueller. It's moved and seconded to approve resolution 018-22. Are any comments, council? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano.
Aye.
Mr. Schroeds.
Aye.
Mr. Wagner.
Aye.
Mr. Bueller.
Aye.
Being 7 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, resolution 018-22 is hereby approved. Agenda items 9 through 14, we have no business tonight. 15, business from the president. I have to advertise our adequate public facilities meeting is June 22nd, 2022, 6 p.m., second floor of this building in the conference room. It's open to the public. Also, real quick, I just want to congratulate all of our Harford County seniors. We did our best to attend every graduation. We did miss one or two, but we tried to do them all. The last we did was Havre de Grace, Bel Air, C. Milton, Wright, and Edgewood. Also want to congratulate the Comer family on their 40th anniversary for their business. It was extremely well attended, just an outstanding event. And then I'm sure others will talk about the Parks and Rec Volunteer Dinner, their 56th annual award dinner. And with that, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. I'll be very brief tonight. I want to send my prayers and condolences out to DFC Glenn Hilliard from Wacomico County. You know, it's definitely sad. You know, our law enforcement have a tough job out there, and I can't say that this is part of the job, but you know, it just breaks my heart that to see you know, the job that the law enforcement officers do out there and the harm that they put themselves in to keep us safe and keep our communities thriving. So I just want to send, like I said, send my condolences out to his family, his friends, and his colleagues. This past weekend, I had a chance to go to Chosen, Mount Zion's Chosen. That's their nonprofit organization. They had a gala. They had a really good time, and you know, they're doing really good things at Mount Zion, and the Chosen Development Corporation is really doing phenomenal job inside our community, especially in the you know, in the Route 40 corridor area, giving out food, you know, helping the homeless, helping children. So they're really doing a phenomenal job there at Mount Zion. And finally, like the Council President said, we had a wonderful time at the graduations for all the high schools. I tell you this, that we have the best and the brightest of our county they're definitely graduating and coming out, and they're going to be doing big things in the near future. The future is bright with the young folks that are coming out. So with that, Council President, I'll yield my time back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too want to express condolences to our Wycomico County family. It's such a senseless tragedy. It didn't need to happen, and just it's heartbreaking. And I know they'll all get through this, but I'm sure Harford County will be there to help them. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Giangiordano.
Thank you, Council President. I'd like to thank Jenny Jarkowski for providing me some more information on the critical area bills on two of the ephemeral streams, if I'm saying that correctly, and she's getting me a little bit more information so I can decipher that. But I definitely appreciated that, needed a little bit more detail, and they were very thorough in providing that. Also want to, it was my first volunteer dinner for the volunteers, so I'm glad I was able to attend that. And then yesterday I attended the Society of Italian American Business Golf Tournament. They were raising money for the ARC and Hartford, not sure the other one, Hartford Action.
Community Action Agency, Hartford
Community Action Agency. Last year they gave $30,000. This year they had a better event, raised more money. So I'm sure they're going to be able to give over $30,000 to those organizations for their help. And we had a nice young lady sing the national anthem yesterday. So thank you, Council President. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano. Mr. Schroeds.
Thank you, Council President. I also want to echo my sympathies for the fallen officer and his family. It's very, very sad. So my thoughts and prayers are with all of them. Also, Mount Zion Church, they are amazing. They also did a Night to Remember prom event on I think it was a Friday. And, for those of special needs and differing abilities. And it took a lot of effort with many, many volunteers. My wife Amber and Maddie, they helped out the whole time there, and they just commented, what that experience was like, and for all of them to have that special night, that special prom. So Mount Zion is just amazing. We are so lucky to have them in our community. They do so many amazing things. Also, congratulations to Upper Chesapeake Health in their regatta fundraiser to benefit the Senator Bob Hooper Hospice House. I know that was a great event. I hit the tail end of that after I was at the Volunteer Appreciation dinner at Swan Harbor Farm, and it is just amazing to see the hours and the years that our rec volunteers put in. I saw Earl Lee there, who I remember when I was a kid playing basketball, and he was telling me, I think he's got 57 years of volunteerism in. I think him and one other person, they're tied. But it was just nice to see him. He hasn't changed a bit. And, I remember when I was in Narsville, kid playing basketball, we played Dublin. I always remember him, and he's still doing it. It's just amazing after all these years. Also, over the weekend, Councilman Buell and I, we attended an event for the Discovery Center at Wooders Edge at Hartford Community College. It was a very well-attended event, and, I think what it's doing is it's trying to get our younger youth into what's going on at APG and some of the great job opportunities that are there. And I think as this facility is built down at Wooders Edge, it's just going to bring them together and act hopefully as a recruiting tool, for all the companies and Aberdeen Proving Ground. But again, like was said about the graduation ceremonies, these kids are really, really bright. They were doing some amazing things. And there was an award ceremony that we presented a proclamation for. And then lastly, just congratulations, like everyone said, to all the graduates. I attended all the ceremonies in the county, and just amazing. A lot of times you only hear the bad about things, but we have some really bright students in Hartford County, and they're going to do great things. They are our future, and I'm confident that we're going to be in a good place. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeds. Mr. Wagner?
Every so often, and I know most of the council members here take advantage of the offering of a ride-along with a police officer, be it a sheriff or one of the municipalities. And last week, I did ride along with an officer in Aberdeen, and that was very interesting. We did several different traffic stops, and each and every time the officer gets out of his car and steps up to a strange car door that he doesn't know who's there or what they've got, you've got to give them all the respect in the world, because the average among us wouldn't step into that position not knowing what you're walking into. And that was a very nice ride along, and I appreciate Aberdeen's cooperation. In fact, I'm doing another one this upcoming week on Thursday in a different area, and see some different things in that neighborhood. I know there was a successful cleanup that was done in Aberdeen this past weekend, and some other events that went on down there. And it's always good to see things that are well attended in the Aberdeen community. Back the first part of May, after the health department's report that they had here, and we talked through, or I'm sorry, not the health department, I'm looking at this sentence and it says health education. The Board of Education, when they did a program for us that evening, and we got off on the subject of their health education classes and what they've got in the school systems, and we all hear from time to time some things that make you raise your eyebrow and your ears twitch a bit, because you don't understand, and I don't understand what some of the curriculum that we've talked about, how it has a place in our school systems, especially if parents don't want to participate in that. Many times they don't know what is in the classroom. And the letter came back from the state superintendent of schools, and there was an interesting sentence in there that they indicated that under the regulations that local school systems must allow parents or guardians to view any instructional materials to be used in teaching family life and human sexuality, and to allow students to opt out on that instruction. So that's a little bit different than what we've been hearing throughout, but it's good for, I think, parents to recognize the fact that the state superintendent stated that you know, anything that they want to come in and check out, they are absolutely obligated to bring that out and show to the parents that request it, and that child can opt out of a program that the family may not feel is appropriate for that child. So, you know, we'll keep a hand on this as we move forward, but at least I wanted to share that letter with council members and with the public too, to let them know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Mr. Beulah?
Thank you, Council President. Yes, as you mentioned earlier, several of us attended the 56th Annual Parks and Rec recognition ceremony at Swan Harbor. Very, very nice event, well attended, had a good time, you know, and, you know, it was for volunteers, by the way, and we have a lot of outstanding volunteers here in the county. So congratulations to them. And as Councilman Schroed mentioned, I think it was this past Saturday, we attended the Magic and Science Fair and Family Festival for the Discovery Center in Water's Edge. And I would say I'm looking forward to the Discovery Center being built, if this is just an example. I think they had roughly about 2,000 people come through on a Saturday. I mean, there was excellent exhibits, and some of the projects that the students, 6th, 7th, and I think 8th graders did. I mean, yes, our future is bright. We have a lot of very intelligent young people. I mean, I was just amazed. It was very well done and very well attended. Also, this is the, of course, I'm sure everybody knows it's Flag Day today, but it's also the 247th birthday of the United States Army, which I'm a proud veteran of. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Beulah. Agenda item number 17, comments and input from attending citizens. Ms. Dixon, do we have anyone signed up?
We do, Mr. President. We have one speaker this evening, John Malamo.
Good evening, sir.
Sir, good evening to you and your colleagues. It's a long-standing tradition to develop a summer reading list, and I would offer these selections for your consideration. First, Radical Chic by Thomas Wolfe. Learn how he coined the term Mau-Mauing the flag-catcher. Next, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, a poem about impetuous decisions, the consequent adversity visited on others, and the penalty for those impetuous decisions. Finally, Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby, a story of arrogance, a story of poor judgment and intemperate actions, and relief in the briar patch. I don't know who wrote that story. It seems more like folklore than an authored story. Now, I have no doubt that representatives from various special interests will call upon you for your favors on their next best special project, and I would offer you these comments for your consideration. You are mau-maued by those representatives as they pitch the benefit of that program. You may well wear the albatross around your neck for an impetuous decision, but it is your constituents who suffer the adverse consequences. And arrogance, poor judgment, intemperate actions will stick to the people forever. But it is your constituents who are thrown in the briar patch. No relief there. Please let us know how your summer recess went. Now, on another note, last week I said nothing. Some people expressed surprise. Some people expressed disappointment. No doubt there were others who were grateful. But I can tell you with great certitude, whether I speak or not, the county council can conduct their meetings with or without me, with my speech or without it. I hope that more and more people make it a point to address the council, to articulate their issues, and to make it known that they are, in fact, the people that you represent. Whether you like their issues, whether you like those people, whether they speak well or poorly, they are Harford County. You represent them. Good night.
Thank you, sir.
There are no more speakers, Mr. President.
With no other speakers signed up, this meeting will be adjourned.